Hello, Ginaldo. I may not be pronouncing your name right. I'm going to speak in English, and if you want, I'll go back and give these answers in my Portuguese if you want. But I think you want the information. And I also know that you can edit this however you want, so I'm going to feel free to explain some stuff different from the questions. But I'll go through the questions. Another thing, I'm going to give you pretty short answers because I think putting him into the documentary, you want it to be about the cooperative and Batik. You don't want it to be about Joyce and me, I don't think. But anyway, your first question was why did we choose Catole de Rocha? Well, that's fairly easy to answer because in a way, we didn't choose it. How to say this? To get a better explanation, you're going to have to go to Pat Campbell, who is Joyce's older sister, and she was there for 2 years before we got there. As a matter of fact, Joyce went and visited her the summer of 1967. We arrived there in the summer of 1968 when Pat had already left. When Pat had already left, now why she chose it, I can't tell you for sure, but her expertise, like Joyce's, was in artesanato. As a matter of fact, her father was a very important person in the United States in the world of artesanato. In English, it's called craftsmanship or arts and crafts. He was important. He was the president of the American Crafts Council and the founder of it. Now, she went because Peace Corps decided to send her there, I guess. You really need to get the story from her. She was there at the same time as Ed Crotty. And Ed Crotty was not a craftsman. Again, I think these people would speak to you about this and explain it if you really want to know. But anyway, Joyce's older sister had been there. Both of them were very skilled in craftsmanship of all kinds. I was married to Joyce only less than a month before we arrived in Brazil. We got married in June, and in August we were already in Brazil, in Recife. And I think we were already in Catole by August. Pretty sure we were. I'm going to go on with this because you can just throw out what you don't want to use. We weren't given training, not really, not official training. Part of the Peace Corps was that you would go for 2 years, and but for 3 months you would be trained before you went. Well, we were part of an experiment. What would happen if we weren't really trained at all and just sent there? With our own efforts to learn Portuguese before we went. And we spent about a week maybe in Recife before we went to Catole. So it was chosen by forces beyond us. The Peace Corps just decided that's where we should go. And I'm sure you could learn a lot more about this if you show this video to Ed or Pat and get them to explain. So that's why it was chosen for us, in a way you might say. I might also add that if I had been all by myself, no, I would have gone to Brazil. But the summer before, as quote unquote training, sort of, I had gone to Africa, and I was in Senegal for a little over a month. But it was part of that program. The idea was, well, you go back to college for your last year, and then boom, you go right straight back to Senegal, and there you pick up the work that you saw Peace Corps volunteers doing there. So in a sense, the Peace Corps volunteers there were training me. But see, that was broken up by the fact that Joyce and I got married. Joyce was going to have to be trained, but Peace Corps overlooked that and said, well, never mind Africa, we'll send you to Brazil, which would have been my choice anyway. Also, I probably, if I'd been by myself, I would have worked in agricultura of some kind, agriculture. But it was a blessing for me in a way that I ended up going into the artesanato because I learned so much. That's a really long answer. You cut from it everything except what you need, and I'll go on to question number 2. Okay, the second question was, where did the group of women come up? Who gathered them for the founding of the cooperative? Well, that was several months, maybe even half a year into our stay before we did that. There was a cooperative trying to form, but it was to be a cooperative of a consumers cooperative. I remember we met when I could barely speak Portuguese, and we talked about that. I think the group was probably gathered by Frei Marcelino, because he was there and very active at that time. Because we didn't know enough people to gather them up. I'm just not really sure. There had been another Peace Corps volunteer there before, whose name escapes me. I never actually met him. And I think he spent a lot of his time riding on horseback around the Catole area, and I'm not sure why. I'm almost certain that Frei Marcelino was the reason Peace Corps ended up in Catole de Rocha, but I can't prove that. Now, we started teaching batik, yes, I think batik, yes, and weaving and making stuffed animals in the barn that was behind the church, near the church, uphill a little bit and behind the church. It belonged to the church, I think. That's where we started. And I remember clearly when they put a cement floor on there and opened it up to make it more of a usable space. That was before we had the new building. And there we worked for a while. So I don't know. Once again, Pat could maybe tell you more. I'm not certain. Oh, another thing I could say. There were girls, really young girls, coming down from the colegio when school was out. They would come down and they would study with Joyce. I didn't really teach myself. I didn't really teach that kind of stuff. I supported her, although there was a very small group of boys that came down from the college and befriended me. And they wanted to learn some English, and I tried to teach them. But for the life of them, they could not say the word girl, G-I-R-L. They tried, and they were very politically minded. And remember, this was a very difficult time. I think many people were suspicious of our presence there. Were we spies? What were we doing? So the group that finally formed the cooperative, I think it maybe grew out of those women that were studying under Joyce and some of the girls. I can't give you a better answer, but I will be able to give you an entire list. It's in the mail on the way to you of the founding members, or the way they were the Christmas after we came back. I'll go on to question number 3. All right, you ask why we chose to work in artesanato, and I think I answered that question already. Pat had been there before us, and Pat is Joyce's older sister. Pat's father was a very important person in United States artesanato, and now how the connections were made, you'll have to talk to Pat to figure that out. But from our perspective, just what to do, that was an open question. If we could have just marketed the artesanato that was there, that we would have done that. We didn't really want to introduce something strange and different. It didn't seem right. But what we saw was pretty heavy to be shipping anywhere. And Sertão was full of that kind of artesanato anyway. So the challenge was to try to come up with something that was marketable further away. And we eventually, while we were there, reached Recife, Rio de Janeiro, the south, to some extent, and international, the United States as well, but not like it is now. Now, why not something else? Well, I think I answered that before, and I was in artesanato really only because I was married to Joyce. As I said before, otherwise I would have worked in agricultura. All right, I'll go on to the fourth question. All right, the fourth question is really two questions there. First of all, what did we think of Catole when we first got there? That's a hard one. That's a hard one to say. We were being well taken care of because we were staying in the home of oh, I can't think of her name right now. Her daughter was Jacira Mi, Donna Barica. In the home of Donna Barica, who lived there with her daughter Jacira Mi, Donna Barica was a seamstress, and her daughter Jacira Mi was a school teacher. So our meals were taken care of. That's where we slept. We didn't go very far away from there because remember, it was not a terribly safe place to be at that time, and our Portuguese barely existed. It took us maybe 2 months, both of us, before we really were comfortable speaking Portuguese. It was dry, it was poor, and some changes that occurred. Now I'm going on to the second part of your question. While we were there, well, when we got there, at that time, Catole de Rocha had, to my knowledge, only one telephone in the whole town, and that was at the prefeitura. Maybe there were more. We had no use for it. And while we were there, telephones arrived, and a really big change was television actually arrived. At first, there was only one television that a normal person could see, and that was down there at the plaza. People would stand outside and look at it. But when various houses got televisions, it had the effect of turning people on the porch right around, so that in the evenings when you would walk along the street, you'd say hi to people and you'd greet them as you went. But after televisions got there, they weren't looking at the street anymore. They weren't on their porch. They were turned around looking into the television. So that was a big change. Water also. See, I can go on if you want later on. I'll be happy to give you a long interview about this stuff. There was a drought while we were there. I would guess that was about 1970 that the drought was at its worst, and it was bad. But I could tell you about the drought, but water was very scarce in the dry season. But something happened where they drilled a big well or something like that, and the town then had a good bit of water, and that made a big difference. All right, I'm going to go on to the fifth question. Okay, I guess that was a fifth question. The number just wasn't there, so I've answered 5 questions now. The sixth one, what was the most difficult at the start? Well, for us, at first it was the language. I mean, we had to learn a foreign language, but we got it. But that was probably the first 2 months. That was the hardest thing of all, and we worked hard at it. But as far as the cooperative is concerned, it wasn't so much getting the people to get it started. We promptly gave up on the idea of a consumer cooperative. This was going to be a producer cooperative. It ended up being a cooperativa mista, which meant it could really be either. Marketing was always a challenge. Getting supplies, that cold water dye had to come all the way from Germany or Switzerland, I don't remember which, because you can't do that with hot water dye. That was a challenge. Marketing, getting the materials, and establishing the cooperative itself, the legal part of that. That's not my domain. I was never trained in that. but I ended up making many trips to João Pessoa and also to Recife uh, in the process of doing the legal work, and we had to have an accountant. And as I say, I was not trained in that, so that was definitely a struggle. Uh, After a while, though, you say about these challenges, we got them under control. And once that last year, after the cooperative had its own building, that was just almost nothing but joy. I mean, and my wife Joyce, she spent her days basically with those women working and laughing and talking and listening to the radio. Uh, and but at first it was harder. I did want to say that getting grants was also an issue. There were some organizations stepped in. There was Oxfam, which is a British English organization, Catholic, I think, and they contributed money. And the biggest grant of all came from USAID, USAID, I think. It was something like $50,000 at that time to build that building. I mean, it was staggering how much money that was. And once the building was set up and designed and stuff, Joyce and I went on a long vacation, and we let the cooperative do it and see to it. And we came back, the building was built. We were gone for about 5 weeks, I think. So the last year was not nearly so challenging as to get it going. And Frei Marcelino was always there, but in the background. He had so many other things that he was doing, but we were well supported. Oh, and there was a German pair of volunteers, Klaus, and I don't know, Fritz maybe? I can't remember the other one's name. They were like Peace Corps volunteers in a way, and they were teaching at the technical school, and they helped. The carpenter of the two built the looms that we had. So Germany had an input as well. And Sudene, Sudene, I don't remember now what that stood for, but that was part of this effort to develop the Northeast. All right, I'll go on to the 7th question. All right, the 7th question is a deeper one. What do I desire for the cooperative, or we? I don't see, Joyce and I talk every day really online, but I don't see her, so she'll have to speak for herself. But I think she would agree that we want to see it survive. When we left, it was healthy. It was in pretty good shape, and we purposely backed off and let the women run it. The cooperative members run it pretty much all the time. We got out of it as much as we could. That was a strategy. It wasn't because we didn't want to do it. It was what we thought was best. And it turned out best. I'm delighted that it survived as long as it did, and frankly a little bit amazed. But about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I realized it had not simply died. With Peace Corps, most of the projects, once the Peace Corps volunteers leave, the project disappears. That did not happen here. Those women kept it going. And I think now it's got promise, since you guys have an interest in helping to revitalize it. I think it could have a really great future. Now, what I would like to see, I'd like to see, of course, younger people get involved. I think they could get really excited about it. I'd like to see men in there as well. That cooperative did not have to be all women. And another thing, I think batik is wonderful. It's made the name. I mean, and it should be continued, absolutely. But there's no reason why a cooperative couldn't include other trades, other skills besides batik. I mean, we did weaving at the beginning, and we made stuffed animals at the beginning. Batik is the one that caught on, and it went. But I would like to see, it's a cooperativa mista. which I understand as mixed. But it's of artesanato for sure. But I would like to see. Well, that's just such a long issue that I'd be happy to spend maybe some more time on what could be done with that cooperative. But right now, I think it's to just get it energized, get it going again, get it enthused. And what you guys, your group is doing is really wonderful. I think it could have a bright future. I'm going to stop now and save the last 2 or 3 questions, which you gave us later, and see what you think of this. I'll send this to you, and see and see what you think about working with what I've done so far. Bye for now.